The greatest illusion of a narcissist is that she loves herself, but true love requires knowing oneself, and the narcissist does not see reality, she sees only her own reflection. She craves admiration yet feels empty, she demands love yet cannot give it, she builds a mask of perfection, fearing that beneath it there is nothing. The tragedy of narcissism is not arrogance but loneliness. The more she tries to prove her worth to the world, the less she understands her own soul. To be free, one must look beyond the mirror and truly see oneself.
We manipulate, we thirst for power, we control, we punish, but our actions are driven by one singular place deep inside. And what's that? We're alone. And we hate it.
Katherine Pierce, the flamboyant oxymoron of a beautiful but terrifying, short-tempered but cunning, caring but manipulative, charming, charismatic, and a narcissistic psychopath of a being. But under all of that, you have a scared little girl that struggles with balancing both her wanting to be loved and her fear of loneliness, along with her crippling paranoia and the necessity of being a survivor against all odds. She often dubs herself as the queen of survival, and it's a title that she well deserves, especially after knowing everyone that wanted her dead, that being Klaus, Elijah, Damon, Stefan, Silas, and so on. But she always finds a way to survive, no matter what. Katherine isn't just a character in the Vampire Diaries, she's a force of nature, a force that's felt throughout the entire show, even when she isn't around, even when she's even dead. That's how impactful her presence actually is. But anyways, today we're breaking down why she's one of the greatest villains in the Vampire Diaries universe, in fact one of the greatest characters in general in the Vampire Diaries universe. So join me as I go through the second installment of Uncovering TVD Villains, Katherine Pierce edition. Katherine Pierce was born Katerina Petrova to a noble and wealthy Bulgarian family in 1473, somewhere in modern-day Bulgaria. Katherine, through her father's side, was a descendant of the ancient witch subclass called the Travelers. Now, does this mean that Katherine was a witch? Yes. Although she never became a practicing one until after she got the cure and became a human. This is because, as she puts it,
Hang on. I'm hardly a traveler, okay? My father banned us from doing traveler magic. He said it was the devil's work, or something dramatic that terrified us.
sometime in 1490, when she was about 16 or 17 years old, depending on the time this event actually occurred, Katherine got pregnant and gave birth to a child out of wedlock. Canonically, we have no definitive proof on any information on the father, however, unofficially, in a deleted scene, Katherine stated he was also a traveler. But anyways, after all of this debacle, Katherine was disowned by her parents and had a child taken away from her and given to a different family, likely out of shame, probably due to them wanting to make the baby's existence a secret. After that, she was either banished or she left on her own accord, but eventually on her travels, she ended up in England and in the hands of one ruthless, psychotic, manipulative narcissist of a madman.
Fashionably late. He likes to make an entrance. Here he is. Katharina, may I introduce to you the Lord Niklaus.
Niklaus is the name my father gave me. Please. Call me Klaus.
She initially assumed the Lord Niklaus wanted her romantically, and she had Elijah, the brother of Klaus, falling in love with her. But she had no idea that beneath all of this, there's a sadistic plot on her life because of who she is, but more importantly, how powerful her blood is. This is because the Lord Niklaus is actually Klaus Mikaelson, the original hybrid, and close to 5 centuries before Katherine's birth, after Klaus and his siblings along with his stepfather became the first vampires, Klaus made his first kill, and as he was born a werewolf, it triggered his werewolf curse. This therefore turned him into the first and at the time only hybrid in history. This allowed Klaus to gain the strength from both sides, making him deadlier than any vampire or werewolf. This of course is an insane imbalance in power that had to be corrected, so Esther, under pressure from Michael, bounded Klaus's werewolf side away through a curse. This curse will later on become known as the fake sun and moon curse and the very real hybrid curse.
So if the sun can't kill an original, why is Klaus so obsessed with breaking the sun and moon curse?
Right. The curse of the sun and the moon. It's also biblical sounding. It's a thing.
What's so funny? Klaus drew the Aztec sketches about the curse?
Roman scrolls, African travel etchings, and any other culture or continent we felt like planting it in.
But why?
The easiest way to discover the existence of a doppelganger or to get your hands on some long-lost moonstone is to have every single member of two warring species on the lookout.
So it's not Aztec at all.
The curse of the sun and the moon is fake. It doesn't exist. Klaus and I faked the sun and moon curse dating back over 1,000 years.
But if there's no curse?
There's a curse. It's not that one. The real one's much worse. It's a curse placed on Klaus.
What are you talking about?
Klaus has been trying to break it for the last 1,000 years, and you were his only hope.
A hybrid would be deadlier than any werewolf or vampire. Nature would not stand for such an imbalance of power. Therefore, the witches, servants of nature, saw to it that my brother's werewolf side would become dormant.
That's the curse that Klaus wants to break.
He wants to trigger that part of him that's a werewolf. If allowed, Klaus would sire his own bloodline. He'd build his own race, endangering not just vampires, everyone.
The important part of this curse that relates to Katherine is the ingredients required to make the curse, and subsequently the ingredients required to break the curse, which were the moonstone, the blood of a vampire, the blood of a werewolf, and finally the blood of a mortal doppelganger. However, to break the curse, the werewolf, the vampire, and the doppelganger all have to be sacrificed. This is when Katherine discovered that she was a doppelganger and Klaus wanted to sacrifice her in the ritual all along, hence why Klaus was so interested in her. So obviously Katherine ran away. This was how Katherine's way of life was actually created and how her narcissistic motto of better you than me was actually created, which by the way just means if you die, it doesn't matter to me as long as I personally survive. This motto of life was greatly endorsed when Katherine went through the most traumatic event of her entire life. In just one day, Katherine went through more trauma than probably anyone in the entire verse. And seeing as this was the late 15th century, probably all of Katherine's closest friends, family, mentors, any past romantic partner she could have possibly had, all got wiped out in one night by Klaus. Most of the people she could possibly have a relationship with all died, and she literally had no one to lean on after the situation actually happened. A situation made a lot worse when she turned Europe upside down searching for her door, but she never could find her. She was completely alone, no family, no carers, and no friends. To put this into perspective how traumatic this event actually would have been, imagine Elena lose both of her parents, both of her actual parents, Alaric, Jenna, Jeremy, Caroline, Bonnie, Stefan, Damon, Tyler, Matt, Caroline's parents, Bonnie's parents, Tyler's parents, Matt's parents, all of her teachers, people she bumped into at school, colleagues of her parents, everyone in Mystic Falls, all gets wiped out in one day. Just so you can understand just how much Klaus obliterated Katherine's mental sanity. So when Katherine was terrified for Elena when she noticed that it's very likely that Klaus was coming to Mystic Falls to look for her, this all made total sense because she told Elena that she doesn't really have much of a choice because she really doesn't. Katherine thought that she did back in the day, and just like she told Elena, she never really had a choice. It's either she dies or everyone she cares about dies. And we saw Elena lose a lot of people throughout the show, and she became a mental wreck, from turning off her humanity and burning down her house to becoming a drug addict. Now imagine how bad this could have been if all of these losses actually occurred in one day and she has no one to help her through it. Why? Because they were also dead. The worst part of the situation is that Katherine can't just turn off her humanity as she doesn't have the luxury to do so. Her without her humanity makes her a lot more reckless in her decision making, which obviously would make it a lot easier for Klaus to find her. Every decision Katherine now makes from that point onwards, the thing that she has in her mind at all times was free of Klaus first and everything else after. This is why after this point, Katherine just views every relationship that she actually gets into or every friendship she actually gets into as just a means to an end, like Klaus does for the exact same reason. Klaus basically turned Katherine into a copy of himself personality-wise. Selfish, narcissistic, ruthless, manipulative, and above all else, cunning and calculated. Katherine's view of relationships, either romantic or platonic relationships, became always as a means to an end as she never really loves or cares about anyone else but herself. This was of course until the 1800s. In the year 1864, Katherine arrived at Mystic Falls under the false name of Katherine Pierce, likely to avoid detection by potential spies for Klaus. This became a name that she's most commonly referred to for the rest of her life, as this is the persona that two of the main characters, that being the Salvatores, actually knew her as. She likely came to Mystic Falls after being informed by Pearl, who was her best friend at that time, about the town Mystic Falls, along with another one of her close friends, Emily Bennett, who was an ancestor to Bonnie Bennett. This is because Emily's life had been saved once by Katherine and she felt indebted to her. On her way to the residence of stay, she spotted a young Stefan who she immediately fell in love with. Some people might say that this is because Stefan was actually a doppelganger of Katherine's lover, but this is very likely not the case due to the fact that Katherine never really mentioned it. Anyway, she took up residence in the house of the Salvatores as a socialite due to her lying to Stefan's father Giuseppe that her family died in a fire to gain his sympathy. After Katherine started living there, she quickly began a romantic relationship with Stefan, whilst also being romantically involved with his older brother Damon. Damon was deeply in love with Katherine, although the feeling wasn't completely reciprocated, as she later on confirmed this to him. As Katherine was living in Mystic Falls, she began turning quite a few humans into vampires. This started alerting the council to their presence, which Pearl tried to warn Katherine about and advising her to flee, but Katherine told her she doesn't need to as she has a plan. We eventually discovered that her plan was to sell out her friends for her own survival and trading in the Moonstone to George Lockwood, and in return he helps her fake her death and escape the vampire roundup. The existence of Katherine was first brought up from as early as the very first episode of the show, and she was first mentioned in the second episode. Over the course of the first season, we slowly began learning more and more about Katherine and the aura of an incredibly beautiful, charismatic, cunning and very manipulative woman that Elena happens to be a doppelganger of. We figured this out through the lens of both of the Salvatore brothers, with both having distinctly different opinions of Katherine. Stefan views Katherine as evil, and all the dark and vindictive qualities of Katherine is what Stefan actually remembers. However, with Damon, he remembers all the good qualities about Katherine: funny, charming and graceful. We as the audience slowly combined both sides to give us an idea of who Katherine actually was and currently is. And when she was finally introduced, we understood that we were very, very wrong, and we learned that she isn't a combination of the two viewpoints, but more so she actually leans more to Stefan's viewpoint than to Damon's viewpoint.
Because I hope maybe you'd understand.
Thank you.
Can I help?
Sure. Hello, John. Goodbye, John.
She continuously proves Stefan's viewpoint of her with multiple acts of selfishness, manipulation and causing pain to others, all to satisfy her ambition and in order to survive. The way that her ambition works is that she always gets what she wants, and when she doesn't, she resorts to violence and threats to get her way. For example, her obsession with Stefan led to her constantly making Elena's life a living hell just because Elena happens to be dating Stefan. This was of course until Elena finally breaks it off with Stefan. But anyways, the first part of season 2 was mostly everyone trying to understand what exactly Katherine is after and why. What is her plan? What is her end goal? However, they never discovered it until it was almost far too late. This was because throughout the first part of season 2, they slowly started piecing together parts of her plan, like turning Caroline into a vampire, help triggering Tyler's werewolf curse, or her wanting the Moonstone. But they don't actually know exactly why she was doing all of that. But anyways, at that point, they only figured out why she actually wanted the Moonstone, and it was for a ritual to break the Sun and Moon curse. Then they discovered that Elena is actually in danger because to break the curse, Elena, the current living Petrova doppelganger, needs to die to actually break the curse. Through Katherine's war to retrieve the Moonstone from the Salvatores, it led to one of the best episodes in the show, Masquerade. This was the first time we actually saw just how insane Katherine is at reading people. Katherine was able to make them believe that they have her all tied up and ready to strike, knowing that the plan was for Lucy, a better way to link her to Elena, meaning that whatever happens to her, happens to Elena. However, she had no idea when Lucy was going to complete the spell, so she had to fight the Salvatores until she gets confirmation that the spell is completed. Using Elena makes it completely easy to force a deal on the Salvatores, as killing off people they don't know wasn't working, but Elena will be the perfect hostage due to both of the Salvatores actually being in love with her. If everything would have went her way and Lucy didn't betray her, then Katherine would have easily gotten the Moonstone through a trade for Elena's life, but Lucy betrayed her after discovering that Katherine was putting her up against a family member in Bonnie. This annoyed Lucy, so she broke the spell and knocked Katherine unconscious, allowing her to be captured and put in the tomb. Now the Salvatores have the Moonstone and Katherine captured, but they were still trying to figure out why exactly Katherine cares about breaking the curse when she can already walk freely in the sun with the help of a daylight ring, so she shouldn't care about making herself impervious to the sun when she technically already is. Then slowly Stefan started piecing together that Katherine is actually terrified of someone, and that her actions in 1864 wasn't a coincidence. Someone wants her and she's currently running away from them. During this time, they encountered an old and very powerful vampire called Elijah, who was referred to as one of the originals. They fought Elijah and won due to the aid of a very powerful tier 1 level plot armor. But in doing so, as Elijah killed Rose's friend Trevor, Rose had nowhere to go, so she was taken in by the Salvatores, and she explains to them who exactly are the originals and why exactly they needed Elena, and they finally get to find out about Klaus. So obviously with this information, they were able to piece together who exactly was after Katherine, and this person was Klaus. However, what they don't know was that this conspiracy is a lot bigger than Katherine, and there are things that Katherine isn't telling them, like why exactly Klaus wanted her. They assumed it was because of the sun and moon curse, but it turns out that also wouldn't make sense why exactly Klaus was so adamant on breaking the curse when he, like Elijah, have daylight rings, especially going to the lengths of doing what he did to Katherine's family. There is almost certainly something much bigger than that Klaus actually probably wanted. Klaus's ambition was very likely not limited to just the sun and moon curse. After Elijah allied with the Salvatores and Elena, we finally discovered why Klaus requires a human betrothed doppelganger. This was when they were able to piece together the reasoning behind all of Katherine's actions, as Klaus needs to sacrifice a vampire, a werewolf, and a mortal betrothed doppelganger. Katherine turning Caroline into a vampire was for this very reason. Helping to trigger Tyler's werewolf curse was for this very reason. She originally was going to use Mason, but the Salvatores killed him before she could. She was going to hand over a vampire, a werewolf, Elena, and a moonstone to save herself. But anyways, this scene is what led to one of my favorite scenes in the entire verse and one of the best acted scenes in general. No words were said, but just Katherine reading the journal of her family was enough to unpack so much about her character. And remember when I said the audience would assume Katherine's actual personality and person of being is actually somewhere in the middle between Stefan and Damon's viewpoints? This scene actually confirms it. What happened to Katherine is what's referred to as trauma cycle. This basically means when trauma keeps getting passed down from generation to generation, one person to another. This cycle started with Michael as far as we know. He went through a traumatic childhood and passed it on to Klaus through violent actions. Then Klaus to run away from his trauma passed on to Katherine through violent actions. And then Katherine to run away from her trauma passed it on to Elena through violent actions. The good thing is that it ended with Elena, as Elena didn't pass it up to anyone else. Katherine's life will break anyone who isn't as mentally tough as a nail. This is because, like we quickly witnessed after the scene, Katherine can't afford to be mentally weak if she wants to survive. She has lost the chance to turn off her humanity. She has lost the chance to be vulnerable to anyone. Katherine tries her absolute hardest to hide the vulnerable side of her from everyone. This side of her was only shown to Nadia, Elijah, Rebekah, and Stefan. The moment after we finally get to see Katherine crying in the modern day, she just went straight back to being a stone cold manipulator to free herself from the tomb using reverse psychology by begging Damon not to kill Elijah, as she will be stuck in the tomb forever. But it turns out the moment an original dies or is daggered, their compulsion breaks, allowing Katherine to run free. But anyways, after Katherine breaks out, she didn't really do much of note, but something I must point out which is important to Katherine's character was at the end of season 2, after Damon was bitten by Tyler and they actually discovered that Klaus's blood is the cure to a werewolf bite. Klaus asked Katherine to take his blood to Damon to save his life. Obviously, Stefan would assume that Katherine would just run away and screw over Damon, but unbeknownst to him, Katherine actually cares about Damon. As much as she mentally breaks him, deep down, she still cared about him. Hence why Katherine surprised everyone by bringing the cure to Damon.
Can I ask you something? Absentee mother to mildly abusive daughter. I'm listening. Do you think, after all the horrible things that I've done, it would be possible to be forgiven?
Of course I do. That's actually why I'm here.
I'll be going through Nadia's storyline in a minute or so, but just before that, I must talk about something very, very important, which is the pros and cons to Katherine's character. More specifically, Katherine's greatness and shortcomings, which is very drastic, as in, if you manage to watch my rankings of every single villain in the Vampire Diaries, you will know that I ranked Katherine at number 3. Most people will have Katherine at number 2 and some would even have her at number 1, but for me, I had her at number 3. Why? Because Katherine was alive for way too long, way past her necessity. Katherine wasn't necessary for any storyline after season 2. Katherine should have died in season 3. Katherine has no reason to exist past season 3. Because one, they didn't obviously want to overwork Nina Dobrev, who is the actress for both Katherine and Elena. But they could have just killed off Katherine because Katherine doesn't really have much of a point anymore. Now don't get me wrong, she's still very entertaining and she's still a great character even when we actually barely get to see her. When she does show up, it is one of the most entertaining episodes. But again, in terms of story-wise, as in terms of her overall character and how well she's perceived from a writing standpoint, that is a major shortcoming. Just like with Klaus, she wasn't supposed to go past season 3. She was only there because the writers just didn't want to kill her off. At least with Klaus, he only stayed for an extra season past when he's actually needed to die. And from that, we actually got the originals. With Katherine, nothing came from that. Here's what I think should have happened with Katherine's character. Katherine should have had the same storyline in season 2. But in season 3, the storyline with Nadia from season 5 should have been moved to season 3. Obviously there's going to be a few changes, but the end goal, as in how it ended and the whole relationship between Katherine and Nadia, should be the exact same. It's just, I think Klaus should have killed Nadia to actually lure Katherine back in. And then in doing so, Katherine, in a fit of rage, losing the last piece of love from a family that she has ever had, sacrificed herself to take down Klaus. We also should have got Katherine and Stefan reconciling, because the version that Stefan actually loved from Katherine was starting to show again, which is the version that is basically human Katherine, or Katherine with actual emotions that isn't psychopathic. Now why would I say Nadia's storyline should be moved to season 3? Well, because Nadia's storyline is Katherine's best storyline overall. I really love Nadia's storyline. Because remember when I said Katherine actually tried to hide a vulnerable side to herself, as in the side that cries and actually shows emotions that may make her seem weak? She actually hides it from everyone else. Everyone sees Katherine as this confident and charismatic woman, but not this scared teenager that doesn't want to lose more than she already has. So she refused to attach herself to anyone. The only person that she actually attached herself after losing her entire family was Stefan, and in some parts Damon. Nadia was the first time we actually see Katherine actually showcase, as in show everyone else in the show that she's actually vulnerable, as in there's a vulnerable side to Katherine, there's a human side to Katherine. Katherine, for the first time since her family got wiped out, actually risked her life to actually save somebody else. And it's even worse knowing that Nadia was actually going to die. The only reason why Katherine was there wasn't actually to save Nadia's life, but to actually be at the side of her daughter just before she actually dies. Nadia specifically asked for Katherine, and Katherine showed up knowing full well that it's a trap and she is very likely going to get killed. That's why I wanted that storyline in season 3. Should have ended with Klaus killing Nadia, Katherine sacrificing himself to take down Klaus. That would have been a perfect ending to Katherine's character. If that was actually the case, then Katherine would arguably be the best character in the entire verse. But yeah, all in all, Nina Dobrev did a fantastic job with the character Katherine. You can really see the drastic difference between Elena and Katherine. And when Elena started actually becoming like Katherine, you actually see how well she's able to portray that. So yeah, she's a fantastic actress. Katherine as a character, although there are a few shortcomings to her, she's still very entertaining to actually watch. She still had a very well written storyline. Don't get me wrong, like I said, there are a few shortcomings because she isn't supposed to be around for that long. But even with that, I still believe that she's a solid character and easily one of the best characters we've actually seen in the verse. But anyways, if you like this video, then why not watch another one? On screen now is the first installment done on this series, which was done on Klaus.